Jenny Trees.
Oh, wait a minute, let me get off the counselor picture here. There she is.
That was actually taken Thursday.
We're quick.
I know that. So I'm up in Northern California at a church called Hillside Covenant Church, and I'm the director of spiritual formation there. I'm actually a product of that church, and I'm not sure how I wound up being on staff there, but God just put me there. So, and I wound up with Listen to My Life because my boss at the time, our executive pastor, is a friend of Sybil's, because everyone's connected to Sybil, right?
Yeah.
Was invited to come to Dallas, and she said, well, can I send Jenny? And I didn't know what I was going to, but I'm up for an adventure, so I arrived here and then figured out what it was. And it was neat to see how I had always, by looking at my map, I saw how passionate I had been about story and helping people see their story. And so it was sort of the bubble in the bubble of, okay, I've realized what it is, and it's actually this, and being more connected to Listen to My Life. So that was a neat start.
So where did you go from Listen to My Life at Leadership Network? What was sort of the next few steps?
The next few steps were figuring out how to bring it home, how to make sure and include it. And I started with I took Rebecca's model exactly, because I'm a rule follower. So she had done a neighborhood group, so I went and invited literally people who could walk to my house in my neighborhood, and we did the year-long experience. And it was, it was really amazing. So amazing to connect with them. And ever since then, as soon as a year-long group ends, I've got the next one going about a month later. So people are queued up, ready to start that.
So how many neighborhood or sort of out-of-church type groups have you had?
Since then, it's all wound up in church, the year-long ones, because they've heard about it, the word spread, and so they're wanting to know more. But some of the others in the neighborhood it was great because they were actually part of the staffs of church too, so I felt like I'd be able to support people who couldn't necessarily connect as intimately with people that they served, so that was a great opportunity as well.
Yeah, it's almost like the counselors. It's like the counselors need to have a place to listen to one another, and then you have church staff people who need to be able to vomit and throw up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My husband's on staff, so I know how that works. So then you've done some really cool things at your church in terms of how you've been able to roll Listen to My Life at church, besides the groups.
Yeah. I am blessed to have a church that really trusts me and trusts where I feel God leading us as far as spiritual formation. A few years ago, we had Sybil come and did an entire My Life Now workshop at church, which was a great experience. And actually, it was the one experience we had men and women at. So it was really neat to have some men kind of connect with it at that level.
And was that staff, or were those just anybody?
That was just anybody.
Okay.
From that, we had our staff retreat, which Sybil led, and that's what she was referring to earlier when she talked about the reviewing my days. And part of my role on staff is leadership development, and so I've actually used my staff doesn't really realize that they've gone through the entire mapping process, but they've gone through at least 7 of the maps. So I've used them in some great staff development and team building exercises throughout the years in some fun ways.
Like for like a day at a time kind of retreats, or what? Tell me what like one of those might look like.
One day we had a half-day staff retreat, and I referred to it as peak experience speed dating. And what was neat about it is we did I don't know how many of you have done the peak experiences through the interview process, which is one of my favorite ways to do it, but we had everyone list some peak experiences, and then they did a 5-minute interview back and forth, and then we called time and you'd switch to the next person. So it was a great way to understand more about your peak experiences and talk to a lot of people on staff about theirs all in one day. So it was a neat connecting point.
Some of your influence is now in our latest peak experience map, so there's some updates in that. So you'll see some of Jenny's influence in that interview process in that.
Oh, I'm curious.
I don't think we gave you any credit, sir.
That's why we're doing it now. That's all you get.
And so you've done retreats with staff, you've done groups at your church, and have you had anything that's not gone the way you anticipated?
I have. After last year, there was a lot of talk about listening groups, and I've been wrestling with it's very easy to put together a small group of 6 of us to work through, and even to do it in the retreat setting, but how to draw men in and how to get people to understand about it, to get a taste of it, to know whether they want to do it or not was something I wrestled with. So I tried to do listening groups. So once a month, people could come in the evening and try a map, and we carved out like 45 minutes to do the map and then an hour to share. And you weren't committed to any more than that day, and yeah, nobody came. So
The first time or two you had.
the first time I had a few people, enough people to make it awkward, actually. Enough people that I had to fill the time with them there, but not enough to really feel like this was going somewhere. So it did not work.
Any other highlights about what you've done with Listen to My Life groups that either in church or in your neighborhood or breakthroughs for you or for people?
Well, there's a few, I guess. I had one really fun breakthrough. I had one woman come up to me in one of my more recent groups, and she shared when someone else was sharing. We do the My Life Story piece. We get 2 hours to share. Like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, but everybody takes it. And one woman, when someone else was sharing, said, you know, my therapist actually asked me if this might be harmful for me to do this sort of reflection back on my life. And I'm sort of staring at her wide-eyed going, well, I don't want to harm you. Like, what am I? Not a therapist? Am I doing the wrong thing? And so I told her, I said, you know, you just really need to ask God to reveal to you what He wants to show you. Please don't feel like, even after you process it, you need to share anything at all. Just trust Him with where He's going to take you down this road. You don't have to go any certain direction. And so the next week she shows up, and the very first words out of her mouth as she began to share was, when I look back at my life, I can't believe how many fun and joyful moments I've forgotten about and want to reincorporate. Oh my gosh, you are there, God, thank you, I knew it. I'm still surprised every time it happens. And the other real gift I have is I had a neighborhood group about a year ago that ended, and they are relentlessly pursuing us being in a relationship together still. And that can be a challenge because you can only be connected to so many people. But this group is we're meeting not on an ongoing, we're always setting our next date to be together. So there's not a monthly commitment, but we always have our next date, and they just love on me. Like, they're like the biggest cheerleaders. They were so excited to know I was going to be back here, and they're the ones advertising it and encouraging new people to go. And so it's been such a gift to have this sort of cheerleading support team that's come out of that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Any church type questions or neighborhood questions for Jenny?
Did your neighborhood group have unbelievers in the groups? Or were they all Christians or
All
believers,
Christians,
professing believers?
all professing believers, very different levels of what that looked like. So it's tricky to not do Christianese or to say, we'll just have faith, it's all going to be good. And there was some having to delicately guide people towards a gentle loving versus...
That's a question, I'm not sure if this is the place, but what about, how do you do this with unbelievers?
I don't know if we've had a lot of experience with that. I had someone join my group for a little bit of time, and I could tell something was happening in her, and then she, bolted and never came back. So I don't know that we've really had a lot of people model.
My experience with that has been that I take pieces of it, and I change the terminology. My hairdresser, we've been doing it for about 2 years, and she's finally to make a time to sit down with me, because she's kind of seen it. She does not want to be in a group. She wants to do it one-on-one, so we're going to do that. And she was raised Jehovah's Witness, and has much damage from that, and so now just has none at all. And so I have just literally brought questions to when I get my hair done.
That's great.
And so we just started, but I always rework. Pretty much always, I really pray over the terms.
Over the what?
The terms,
Uh-huh.
because those terms are so important.
The wording,
Because,
yeah.
yes, the words. I always wordsmith,
Mhm.
because many of them, she will immediately shut down. And I've even said, if I said it like this, how does that make, what do you think? She's a thinker like me. So I'll say, if I said it like this, what would you think? And she comes right back. I mean, it's just like, you to see everything, all that bad history just comes forward and she just goes dark. And so it's just a thought, it's just being sensitive to God speaking of how to do that. I have a super heart for this because everybody is longing for reason. That's really my heart.
Seems too certain maps are probably better introductions and maybe to linger longer in. Like the My Life Now one seems like it has a safe place to begin, but then to be able to kind of rest in and ask questions longer. The lingering question part is always profound because some people are stuck on that and, well, why is that? You know, let's to be able to take some time and wrestle with why can't you come up with one? Can take people to God when they don't expect to go there.
I think the looking for God in your day, you know, it's just recognizing her definition, which is very distorted of who God is and that relationship and all that kind of stuff. But just the things in her life that happen, and so to talk about those things in her life in context of, so what does that mean? How do you work through that? Where are the, you know, so you're doing the same thing, knowing that she doesn't have the Holy Spirit, but you know, just that she's very self-aware, she's much a thinker, you know, and so it really, God is at work in her, you know, it's just really.
Sybil?
And in some ways, Molly, the text, since there's not a person who did not come from God, not a person, so if you have that in your mind, and you have that in your own heart, and then you get born, and it isn't very long before tragedy happens, and there's this long story of redemption, and you go through, and Ecclesiastes says, and you put eternity in their hearts. So there's this longing for something more, and not so you can find it, but so that you will be found by it. So when a person walks in and saying, you know, I'd like to do this, or this conversation that Molly's having, what you know is God is present. They just haven't named him. And he's there because they wouldn't be asking those questions. In the lingering question, the reason people don't go to that question, because right underneath it is the God question. Who is God? And as long as the evil one can distract you from the lingering question, got you just going on some treadmill somewhere.
And the first time, I'll never forget the first time, I looked at her and said, you realize that that's God, didn't you?
So you really are just helping the person discover a knowing